Welcome to our very next webinar today, which is Using AI Tools Part 2, Turning AiM Data into Action with AI. Something that the amount of questions and the amount of enthusiasm that I get whenever I talk about, whenever I chat with people that I know and we're talking about AI, data analysis and then what's next, and AI always comes up. And a lot of people have a lot of interest in it, but not very much knowledge. Obviously, it's something fairly new, and so we're taking little bites at grabbing some information, and we brought the perfect person in with James. Hello, James. Good to have you here with us again.
Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. I love doing these, and so I relish the chance to come and talk to everyone and to work with you all at AiM, Roger.
Absolutely, it's great having James here. I think I'm gonna let me slide to this 14th time of being with us. But back to the first slide, the AI thing. Whenever I mention it or whenever I talk to people, it is surprisingly often that the conversation comes back to what can AI do for me when it comes to my data coming out of Race Studio 3? What is there a way that I can use that? How hard is it? I'm not super technical. I can download my data and take a look a little bit, right? But I'm a little scared of the AI thing, right? So been chatting with James a little bit. He put on one earlier. Matt probably can put up the link to the very first one, which was just a little bit ago, back in August, and that you might want to watch that one a little bit. James is going to go a little bit over that, some of this, a touch of review, and then so I hear this a lot, but the technology is changing so quick and getting better so quick. In my own little world of trying things out and playing with it as well, in my life here, I have learned a lot really quickly, and it's a little bit easier than I always thought it was. So I'm interested to hear what James has to say. So James is joining us today. Again, he's been with us a long time. So I've known James since probably the late 2000s, maybe 2010, somewhere in that area. And he was living up here in the Northwest near me, and we would see each other at the racetrack. And then he came to a number of webinars or seminars that I put on locally, and so we got to know each other quite a bit there. And James has always been very helpful for everybody else, and we've always shared a bunch of information. And so, James, I appreciate you coming and doing this again, and we look forward to some maybe in the future as well. But give us a little bit of background beyond what we have here. Just tell us what you've been up to lately, and then we'll jump in.
Sure. You covered most of it. It was really interesting that I started out with data acquisition with a race keeper, I think it was called. And I went to one of Roger's seminars, and the AiM Solo one, I think it was, or just the AiM Solo was just being launched. And it was the cost point and everything was so popular that all of a sudden we started to see a number of them at the grid. And one of my colleagues said to me one day, if you plug that in, some data comes out of that device. And I was like, huh? Oh, that's interesting. And from that point onwards, that's how I started to really get into understanding and enjoying the aspect of racing, which was looking at data to find improvements. So, these conversations on AI are just a sort of a natural extension of curiosity, I think, more than anything else. And the one thing I will say to everyone on this call is nothing we're going to talk today is matter of fact or set in stone. It's more for all of us to start figuring out how this is going to work for us, I think. And so from the first one of these I did, I think it was in August. I just raced in the Pacific Northwest at Portland Raceway. I haven't gone back there after a number of years. We looked at some sort of endurance racing data. But what you'll see is every discussion that we show today is really an extension of my personal learning journey with AI. And so what I'm learning, I'm trying to translate into useful information, which hopefully at some point someone's going to come on here and go, what you were doing was good, but look at this, which is much better. And that's a wonderful thing. And I think that that's where we want to get to. So ultimately, this is you're following the way that I'm picking up how AI can help me. And hopefully it's passing on some ideas to everyone on the call.
Perfect. So just to kind of jump in, you talked about in our first seminar some steps that you like folks to follow. Let's kind of go over those just a little bit, just to kind of set the plate. There is some basics that need to be followed in order to get good results, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that some of these we've sort of improved, and we'll go through that. The last time we did it, we had to clean some data. We may not need to be able to do much of that with this analysis. I think I've figured out how for it to clean it for me. But nothing, is ever more sort of important. That's the worst sentence I could possibly use. Nothing is more important than knowing what you want to get from the tools. And AI is a tool. Just like the hammer doesn't tell you where to hammer the nail in the wall to hang the picture, the same thing with AI is not going to tell you what to do. It's a tool for you to be able to use. And so as a result, knowing what you're looking for really helps in this particular conversation. Now, that doesn't exclude curiosity and that doesn't exclude discovery. But what it does do is if we're thinking about analysis, it's the same thing that I think I've mentioned before when we look at why would you download the data the first time from that AiM solo device? Well, I'm sort of a slow learner, so I have to see things repeatedly. And so overlaying 60 laps of doing something wrong and one lap of doing something right helps me understand, I've got to be able to figure out how to do something right with repetition. And so that's an important thing. And nothing changes in the scenario. Now, when we talk about getting the data ready, what I'm going to show today makes life a little bit easier. We'll be able to download something directly from Race Studio 3 analysis and not have to do much with it. And this is some of the stuff that I've learned along the journey of doing this. Journey sounds so dramatic. It's more, I've been learning how to use AI. And so it's like being able to learn how to use any kind of tool. The more you master it, the better you're going to be. So I think I've gone from absolute novice to sort of slightly adequate, moderate user. But there's so much more that we see. So I think that's important. And then the next thing is, this for me is the most important thing. I was explaining to Roger and Matt earlier on today. I'm the search engine generation. As much many of you may or may not remember this, but I used Netscape Navigator. I used Alta Vista and Lycos. I used the internet before Google, which my niece and nephew cannot get their heads around. But at the same time, in that basis, we find that I was typing in a sentence. That's how I use these sort of prompt boxes, and now, I've started to think through, okay, well, to get the most out of it, you've got to be able to put in a better prompt. And I think everyone hears the word prompt engineering and thinks that's quite a sort of like having to have a master's degree. It's really just how do you construct it. And so the four key elements are the goal, the context, the source of the data, and most important, the expectation that you want from it. You might not get it, but at the same time, it's there. But what we found is really particular interesting, and I say we as in the royal we, but this is something that as I've been learning how to do that is give your AI a persona and it changes the sources of data that it goes and finds. So I think that giving your AI a persona helps focus how it will respond, because the more information you put into that prompt, the better it will be responding. So we're going to use a lot of that knowledge today. And so these are the three things that I wanted to be able to sort of recap from the last time we spoke and sort of focus on the next slide, which is what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to do two things. The search engine generation actually has to take their glasses off to be able to see the screen nowadays. I have to say, this is the problem that I have in everything that we're doing. We're going to look at two things here, which is the first, we're going to look at Gemini from Google. Last time round, I was doing a lot of stuff in Copilot. I had said that Copilot was the first thing I used because it came bundled with my Office 365. But since then, and I still use Copilot a lot for some things, I've evolved a lot of my analysis to Gemini. Not everyone is necessarily in agreement. It doesn't matter. I think that any of the tools we're going to use, this is just something that I found personal preference for. So we're going to look at Gemini, and we're going to use this to analyze an AiM session. So we're actually going to download an entire session's worth of data, not a split times report or anything like that. We're just going to download an entire session, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And then we're going to build a custom agent, which again, all of a sudden we're going to be like, oh my God, are we building agent? Is this agentic AI? Is this? No, we're going to build effectively what I like to call the rinse and repeat prompt, which means I don't have to write a paragraph every time I want to actually get some information. I can do it once, and we're going to show you how to do that, and it'll help us figure out how to analyze the data. And that's the first thing we're going to look at. And then the second thing we're going to look at is something called NotebookLM. It is a Google property, but it is something which I've started to discover is a fantastic resource to be able to put loads of files and information and then start quizzing the data. Now, unlike Gemini, Notebook won't necessarily go to the World Wide Web and grab information to be able to feed as part of its language model. Instead, it will only work through information that you upload. And so this is a fantastic tool. I find that if we want to be able to look through things that we may have studied, we may have watched, we may have downloaded. And just to give you an example, some of the files we're going to look at is like the Race Studio 3 manual, which I believe now is probably 300 pages. And so to be able to put it into a tool like this and ask a question, which is how do I make a math channel, just makes it easier to be able to work through. So we'll look at these two today, and hopefully it will give some sort of inspiration as to what to do. So that's what we're going to cover, and questions along the way on the chat box will be good. And I'll finish 10 minutes or so earlier, and we can chat through some of the questions as they come up. So,
Okay.
Roger, if you let me present, if that's all right.
I will stop the share right there. And while James is
Perfect.
firing his up, he mentioned something earlier about AI. You need to have some input, some ask it the right questions, right, and learn the basics of what he's going to talk about today. And I see that as the same as when I was teaching folks every day about using Race Studio 3. I always talked about it's like a wrench in the toolbox. You bought the tool, you got to get it out of the toolbox and use it, right? And Race Studio 3 analysis was the same way, and now AI is the exact same way. So I am 100% in agreement with James.
And thank you, Roger, and I appreciate that.
Everything is good.
We've definitely worked through many things as we've gone through, but I think that this is interesting. I don't necessarily know if this is going to be a substitute for Race Studio 3 analysis. In fact, I doubt it.
Yeah.
But it's designed to be able to give you a few areas of sort of pause for thought. And more than anything else, one of the things that I often find is that people use Race Studio 3 a lot to set up their devices. The number of people who, when I go to the track, have got Race Studio 3 from when it was launched, still on their machine because they haven't updated it, but at the same time, it gives them, enough to be able to configure a dash. Getting into the analysis part is often quite daunting, and so this is just one way of being able to sort of expedite that. So we are in Race Studio 3 analysis right now, and I could pick on any of these sessions that I have. I have some information from an anonymous webinar presenter presenter, I shouldn't say that out loud, I should say participant today, who we might look at their data. But before we do that, I want to be able to talk about how we download the data from this to be able to put in AI that I found to be useful. Now, previously, we had gone into a session and we had downloaded from something like the channels report or split times report. But what we actually want to do is before we even open up a session, if you get one that's got a data attached, this is data and video, doesn't matter. If I right click on it, if you scroll down to here, you've got this option that says export item as. And still to this day, we've got Race Studio 2 download option. So if I click here, it'll ask me where I want to be able to put it. You can stick it anywhere you like. And if I click that folder, the next thing it's going to ask me is what kind of channels. Now, the GPS channels are included by default. So if you've only got an AiM Solo or Solo 2, sorry, excuse me, and you don't want any extra channels, you don't need to download them. But if you've got math channels in the file, if you've got additional sensors, so if I scroll down here, I usually take brake pressure front and rear, then I can get bias, for example, which is fun. As I scroll down, I've got RPM, which is usually useful. I've got all my tire information. It doesn't matter, I'm not going to use this file, so I can give an example of what I'm clicking on. I just click on OK, and it's going to download this file. And as annoying as my dual screen would be, it's over here. It's downloaded the file. Let me just bring this back over here. And here it is. So this is the file it's just downloaded. And if I open it up, you're going to see all of the sessions that it's downloaded. Now, it's a ton of data here because this is logging effectively every part of the session that is there. But what I did in the last session was I was like, okay, well, we need to clean it up and we need to give some instructions as to what each of these mean and blah, blah, blah. Don't need to do that anymore. So that's a positive. So that's the file. And then from this point onwards, we don't need Race Studio analysis for anything right now, which is nice. And so what we're going to do is we are going to load up Google Gemini, which is here. And so what I'm going to show you is something which is called a gem. Now, if I go into Gemini, now you can do these with ChatGPT on some subscriptions. I don't know if it's all of them, but you can build something called a custom GPT, which is basically if you go in here and explore gems, and this is, by the way, I've tested this with the free version. If you've got a Gmail account or anything that you just use for every day, totally works. I've signed up for the I'm actually on the trial version right now for a month. You can use these. And so you'll see that these options are available for everyone, is what I found. And if you click on New Gem, what it's going to do is it's going to give you the option of naming something. Now you can go in here and you can name the session, quick description, and this is the prompt. Now this prompt is the rinse and repeat part that you have every time you set up, every time you want to be able to do some analysis. It means you don't have to write it every time. Plus there's a few bits and bobs you can put in here. Sorry, British phrase. There's a few items that you can put in here that will make the system a little bit more knowledgeable. So just to be able to sort of get back from that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one that I built. And today we're going to see, I've been experimenting with another one here. Today we're going to focus on AiM Session Analyzer. And if I click on here and edit, you'll notice if we open this up, it's called the AiM Session Analyzer. Description is what I want people to do, which is you upload an AiM CSV file, which you just watched me download, and type let's go. You can type anything you like. I just said let's go because it starts the process off. And then there's this very detailed prompt that is here. And it's quite a lot. And you're like, oh my God, how long did it take you to write this or this sort of stuff? Never fear. There is an easier way of doing this. You can have the AI tool write the prompt, which is lovely. It can help you write the right kind of prompt based upon what your goal is as to what you want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to this prompt that I created here. I'm just going to close that out. Don't need that. And I'm going to go to building a Google Gem for Autosports. And I'm going to close this for just a second. I'm going to scroll up to the top. And I've said, I'd like you to help me build an instruction for a Google Gem. The persona for this gem is an autosport engineer. So remember I was saying, give it a persona, who is looking at race car telemetry files to help find trends in both drivers' performance. So this is the driver one. I'd like you to start by asking, sorry, excuse me. I just had a cold, so I cough every now and again. I apologize, especially if this is being watched later on. From there, I'd like a gem to understand the analysis. Following could apply driving trends, session analysis, or car analysis. Session and lap analysis, how the driver performed, depending on the information available, and go through this. And I'm not going to repeat it all, but basically this was the prompt I wanted. I said, from a driver point of view, I want to be able to know about the driver, their inputs, depending on the channels that are available, because sometimes someone's going to upload a channel that has got GPS data because it's just come from a solo. Other times you may get a file from someone such as myself, who's sort of if there is a channel available, I want it. And someone like Matt, for example, who also shares this very same passion for if there's a channel that could be possible. And I always find out that he's got way more channels than I have. It's definitely there in terms of amazing stuff. And so you've got the ability to look at different information. So we've got session analysis, we've got driver analysis, and then also car, which is finally what's happening with the car. If the information is available, if there's any information to help with the setup, can we understand a little bit more of that? And then basically, based upon the data availability, put out a document. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you because it's quite lengthy, but it said, yeah, no problem. I will build you that prompt, which it built me the prompt, which I'm actually using. Here it is. If I open this up, this is the persona that it's created for me. Here is the prompt, which went into my gem. And it asks me for the questions and it helps me set up the solution. Now, knowing, of course, that this was going to be a presentation where words, are oftentimes better presented as information, I also asked it to build me an infographic so I could show you everything that I put into the gem to make it easier to look at. And so here, basically, this gem embodies the persona of an expert autopilot engineer. All of the information is an analysis is bound exclusively to the data you provide. It's quite an important variable here because I do not want it to go and find somebody else's race session and mix them up. So I'm like, just use my data or the data file I've loaded. Here's the flow that I asked it to do, which is greet me. And I didn't do any of this. This is just what it created for me in terms of the prompt. Ask what happened on the track, what was happening with the weather, what channels are available, go and review that, offer analysis options, and then deliver findings. Now, here are the pillars: session, driver, and car. Just discuss those. Deliverable actionable insights. Now, this is important because the reason I designed this is that I want this to be something which I can actually look at on my phone because Gemini works on a phone as well. As we know, you can have the mobile version. So when I'm at the track, I can quickly upload a file and have this analyze the data and give me information. The inputs are coming from the AiM CSV file, information I provide, and a knowledge file. Now, you may be wondering what that is, and I'll show you in just a second. But the last thing is, and this is what I've been learning over time, is that we hear phrases like hallucination. I use AI a lot at work now to be able to create workflows. And the number of times when it doesn't have an answer, it doesn't say, I don't have information or an answer, it will make something up. So this is why it was so important at the beginning. I was like, okay, stick to 100% and stick to this truth profile. Stay within the bounds of the data I've given you, acknowledge your limitations, be truthful and accurate, and more important than anything else, if needed, show your workings. Because one of the things that we're finding in practice, not necessarily just with this data analysis, but everywhere I'm seeing AI, people take it for gospel that that is the answer. And Matt and I were just having a quick conversation with Roger as well, which was there are times when it says something which isn't true. So we have to have a little bit of knowledge before we really go, okay, that's totally believable. So we set that up. And effectively, if I go back into now looking at the session analyzer and just have a look at that again, you can see that information is all housed here. Now, the last thing is you may have heard earlier that I wanted to be able to avoid the need for cleanup, explaining what the data file was. Now, the beauty of it was, and I know he's not on the call, but Emiliano, when they built Race Studio 2 analysis, is they created a user manual for it. And when you downloaded a CSV file, there was a file that would actually tell you what it was. So if I click on this, you can see that I went to that document and I found it. And I just said, okay, this is the information. This is how it's set up. This is what it downloads. So this is what you should expect. And I'm not going to necessarily go through the whole thing, but you get the idea that all of a sudden, now we've got an easy document to be able to refer to. And just so you can all feel comfortable, I will share the link so you can all play around with this gem later on. So there's going to be no sort of like, oh, now I've got to recreate it. So now you've got everything you need. And so what we then said is, okay, well, let's get it going. Let's have a look. So let's have a play around and see what's happening. Now, I've got two that I've already done, which I'll probably go into so that we don't necessarily have to belabor the waiting sometimes. I'm in the UK, and which hopefully the accent gave it away. The fact that it says London, UK down here is another giveaway. But at the same time, when the US is online, Gemini has a tendency to be a bit slower. So sometimes it is slower here than it is in the afternoon than it is in the morning. It sounds strange to say, but it's just how it is. And so let's start off, but I won't necessarily run through it. So what we're going to do is we're going to upload a file. So I'm going to upload a file, CSV that I've downloaded, and I'll probably upload my own one here. I'll click on open, and I'm going to type in, this little circle means it's loading. I'm going to type in the word, let's go. Now, I haven't figured out if it will do a prompt that makes any more sense. So let's go is just what I use, but whatever comes up, you probably could write go or commence or anything that you'd like to, but I just write let's go just for fun. And it's going to analyze the session. It'll take a little while to go through all of the sort of information, but what it's now doing is it's taking the file, it's looking at the knowledge file, it's reading through the prompt, and it's using all the prompt that I've set up to be able to take that file and help now analyze this particular approach that we want to be able to have a look at. So this CSV file that we've just looked up. Now, I said sometimes this can be a little bit of time, but let's see what it says. It also says, tells you what it's doing, and you can actually click in here and see what it's
looks like it's
doing.
buzzing through fairly quickly. So
Yeah, it is, which is lovely. And so it's, and I've also got it on the thinking mode, which anyone who knows Gemini, you've got a flash mode and a thinking mode. I've got thinking mode because you want the thinking version when we're doing data analysis. And so it's going through all the information that it's gathering, and it'll probably ask me for some more information. And if it doesn't load in just a couple of minutes, that's no problem, because just like every good presentation, I've got one that I prepared earlier, which hopefully will work. And so I do want it just to show you this one just quickly at the beginning. Ultimately, here we go. So here I'm just looking information. I'm here to break down the telemetry data to ensure the analysis. Can you provide me a bit more context about this session at Silverstone National? So it found the track. Was it sunny? Was the tree in a damp or thing? What are your goals and issues? Now, remember earlier I said the channels. Now this file has more channels. So it's gone in and said, okay, well, we've got throttle, brake pressure, front and rear, steering, and RPM. Vehicle dynamics, I've got speed, lateral acceleration, longitudinal acceleration, and gyro. We've got tire temps and pressures. I don't have that many more sessions on a car with an engine from the 1970s. So that's about as far as I got so far that is here. So it's read the file and now it's going to ask me for some information to analyze. And so it say, do you want to do session and lap, driver analysis, car analysis? So let's just see how quickly it can do this. So we say it was a damp track, mid-morning. And it was nothing worse than waiting for someone to type in a demo. Let's now
The only
start
thing worse
with
is me doing the typing and people waiting
session,
rather than you.
and you don't have to do this exactly, but I'm going to do it. So let's just start with the session and lap analysis. Now, don't worry if this takes forever because I've actually run this actually with an anonymous webinar participant and the data file that he happened to share with me yesterday, so we can have a look as to how long it works. But it's now going to go in and start churning through that data and really working through the prompt of all the details that I wanted it to look at and give me some information that is available. So that's the first thing. Now, notice that this is taking a little bit of time. Don't worry. I'll see, this is quite interesting. Developing a speed trace. It's something that we're all quite familiar with, I would argue, as we're looking at the information. So in the essence of time, and this might load while we're chatting, let's go to the race data analysis I did earlier on. Excuse the scroll up. It always starts at the end rather than the beginning. So this was it. So we got to about here. So this is your anonymous webinar participant. It's actually not me, it's somebody else who's on here. And the track layout, weather conditions. And so it said, I found these channels, throttle position, brake pressure, RPM. There's a lot of channels here. Hopefully that's a bit of a giveaway. And you can see all of the additional information. We've got TPS data, we've got everything that is there. And so I was like, great, these are the options, session and lap, driver analysis, what would you like? So I said the track is Club Motorsports. By the way, Club Motorsports website says it's the best track in America. I'm like, that's a bold claim. I'm sure Watkins Glen would have an argument with that, as would many of the others. But apparently, I'd love to go there. It looks like it's the best track in the world. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to show me lap consistency. Now, again, there's going to be some things which, if I was going to be going through in detail, I'd say get rid of the out lap and the in lap, because ultimately that's going to give this information. It's not going to be useful. But then it's going to start looking at speed trace for the best lap versus another lap, which is there to be able to see. And it starts giving me great information. I process your session data. Here's a high-level breakdown on your performance. Remember, all I've done is downloaded the CSV. And it's going to say total laps, best lap 145, average lap 147.
James, that scroll up back up to that average, that lap. What was interesting, I didn't see this before, but best lap versus your average of the 7 laps, it looks like. So it averaged your laps and put the best against it. That's actually an additional powerful little tool there. Interesting.
I agree with that totally, and that's something which I've been messing around myself with in Race Studio 3 analysis with best sector analysis and those sort of things. But it's done this on the average, so it's a nice way of looking. And as you get into the data, as you go through, what I love is that performance, looking at the lap consistently, we can see a clear trend. You spend the middle of the session plateaued around 147 and suddenly drop on lap 11, suggested either a change in driving commitment, which is quite ballsy in terms of the statement. It's like, imagine a coach saying, are you now more committed? But it's AI, so we forgive it in terms of what's going on. Braking later and carrying more speed, or the tires finally coming into their peak window later in the session. Detailed finding is compared your best lap, 11 in green, against the represented average lap. And the speed carrying difference, speed trace shows on your best lap, you're consistently carrying 2 to 3 4 miles an hour minimum through the mid-corner phases. Braking confidence, their braking traces, and I'm not going to read all this out because it's quite detailed, but it definitely goes into some really useful information. So I'm like a slightly steeper, but indicating more confidence in the brake pedal. The gap, the 1.6 second difference is made up in one corner. It isn't in one corner, it's accumulated. I love this phrasing here. You are nibbling time everywhere, a tenth here, a tenth there, by simply rolling more speed. So you're sort of eating at it. And I love it's using this sort of language. Now, what generally tends to happen is that these AI tools learn your language. And so depending on how I write, it oftentimes gives me back the language that's familiar to me. But I had also asked it to be a race data engineer, so maybe this is race data engineer language. That said, never heard Roger say the word nibbling, but you never know.
I was going to say maybe around Thanksgiving. Kyle has a question that actually kind of rolls into right where you're at, and maybe it'll
Yes.
take you a good break just to think about this one and
Yeah.
take care of this one. But does it reference previous files for comparisons? Bottom line is, does it conclude that grip is down versus the motor has lost power over time? Or do you need to bring up that second test and actually have it be, I see another gym over there that maybe
Yeah, I
you have
would do
multiple
second
files.
test. I would do second test. I don't think it's keeping this as a log. It will remember what I found is it remembers the type of analysis, so it automatically says, "Oh, I've noticed you've uploaded a blah file. Would you like me to conduct this?" I've noticed it does that, and it recognizes the type of file, but it doesn't have a memory of what there is. So I think that in that instance, what I've seen is just upload the extra data files. And you can always create a prompt that deliberately asks it to look at whether it's a motor condition, whether it's a track condition. I mean, we know as racers in the excuse book manual 101 that clearly on a hot day that's going to cost you at least 2 seconds over a nice cool morning. And so, there's different elements that it can factor in. So whatever I think as you go through this, you can rewrite that prompt in the gem to be able to represent exactly what we're looking for, but it won't remember the file as far as I've observed so far. But there is another thing which we can look at later as we look at NotebookLM. So try tracking the break zones earlier, not Matt, in this session to find limits sooner. So I'm like, okay. So we've had a look at this, and it's like, okay, potential gain is if you can normalize the driving standard of lap 11, you're effectively gaining 1.5 seconds per lap instantly. Visually, I've generated two charts to visualize this, lap consistency and speed trace. Those are the ones at the top. Next, it says, we'd like to do a driver analysis. I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do a bit of driver analysis next. So the next thing we start looking at is this is your time delta in terms of lap 11 versus the average. And you can see where the delta is in terms of time. And you can see here, as we all know, braking a little bit later. But let's see what it says in terms of analysis, because my brain instantly goes there and you can, look at a million data traces. You're like, oh, I can see something there. But let's see if it sees it too. And again, remember, that's the show the thinking thing and understand, have a bit of knowledge. I performed a deep dive into your driving inputs and your best lap 11 against a reference lap 7. Black line represents time gap. When the line goes up, you're gaining time. Good. Key trend. You aren't gaining time in just one spot. The line is steady upward slope, meaning you're consistently faster throughout the lap. However, there are 2 to 3 distinct steps where the line jumps, indicating significant gain in the corners. So braking confidence, result, allow your braking later to scrub speed more effectively rather than dragging the brakes over a longer distance. And so, a sharp application of the brakes rather than necessarily trailing in might be the answer. We don't know. Something to try. And I think this is ultimately what we're looking at, something to try. Throttle application. Your throttle pickup is the best and is notably smooth and more committed. In the section, this is where, again, so now we've hit a block, right? This is where Race Studio 3 analysis becomes way more useful. And this is where there'll be a partnership between the two, or we will have to start adding more data files to the AI. I told it to go and find Club Motorsport. It would have found a reference, it would have understood the details in terms of the length of the track and the time and the file from the CSV file. But what it hasn't done is it's not necessarily indicated which corner that is. So if you segment the track, we could go back and potentially look at this in the other tools. So there's always going to be sort of an interplay between the two, but there's still really sort of interesting trends. You can see the green line goes to 100% throttle sooner and holds, whereas the red line has some hesitation, which we could see if we go back up here and have a look at this file, which I'm not going to go into details. The result, this allowed your brakes slightly later, scrub sweep more effectively rather than dragging the brakes a longer distance. Then we have a look at throttle. This one's mid-corner speed, which is lovely. And then recommendations here, attack the brake, commit to full throttle. These are the basics of what I get told all the time because of my driving style, which is be a better driver. But at the same time, I love these sort of basics of what we're talking about. Commit to the throttle. If you can't commit to the throttle yet, you've gone to the throttle too soon. And I think that these are the basics. Now, if remember, we told it to be a race engineer, it's probably referencing other documentation to be able to do this analysis. So the impact is in terms of gives you an idea in terms of what you save. So the last one is car. So this is the one where we look at the car dynamics. And so it's like, okay, this is tire pressure evolution. This is tire temperature over time, which is interesting. Your tires come up quite consistently in terms of the time of the session in seconds. This would be interesting if we could put it in laps. I could go in and ask it instead of doing seconds, figure out how many laps this is. All sorts of things that I could rewrite the prompt. This shows the prompt of the shock velocity. Pretty even. We've got some interesting information here. And then the last one is it gives some information. Now, I've examined the vehicle dynamics, focusing on suspension and tires. Suspension. The data reveals a significant anomaly in the suspension data that suggests a sensor issue or broken component. The rear left shock is showing almost zero movement compared to the others. This is the standard deviation of movement, except for the rear left. Now, essentially flatline is how it's describing. Now, I don't know if the shock got stuck, or maybe the shock pot got stuck, or maybe it's broken, or maybe not sending a signal. But it's interesting for something to be able to have a look at. Bit of diagnosis, same thing with tire pressures. Front left is the hottest, followed by the front right. This is expected for a clockwise track where the left side takes the load but spreads reasonable. The rears are cooler, suggesting the car might be slightly understeering. Working the front's harder, or simply the rear is very stable. So again, you've got some interesting information to be able to look at. Recommendations: check the shock. Tire pressures, your front's significantly lower than the left. Check your core pressures, all sorts of stuff. Now, again, I will send all of this so you can have a little read of it and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. But then I'm like, what is the last thing? So summary: we found a sensor, tire pressure, and birds. Would you like me to summarize our findings into a run play for your next session? I'm like, yeah, please just do that. Summarize all findings into a final run plan for the next session. Here you go. Everything that it's recommending. When you're in the garage, fix your left shock. Balance your tire pressures potentially. Address your understeer. Look at objectives as a driver. You can look at here, and so it's nice. And you're like, okay, well, these are cool. Now, at this point, I've started to get a few things to be able to experiment with from that file. And if time is of the essence, this is an interesting. Now, one of the things that I love about it does it at ChatGPT as well. Please don't think I'm biased towards Google. It's just it's a platform that I use a lot of work now. And I said, you guys are learning as I'm learning, and I'm just pretending I know more than anyone else, which I don't. But at the same time, this is one of the things that I love. If I was on my mobile, if I click here, I can click the word listen, and now it will read that summary to me. If I've got my headphones on, or if I'm walking around the paddock or the grid, I don't always need to read it. I can just quietly have a walk and listen to what it's saying, or to be able to focus what's going on. And so this is a nice way of being able to sort of think through that. So these are some
Does
of
it
the
read it
stuff.
to you with a British accent?
Well, shall we find out?
No, it probably will take too long.
Oh,
Plan. Session 2 preparation. Here is your consolidated action plan.
very sort
I
of
think
like.
it does a little bit.
Your previous session.
And so it reads that. I wonder if you can specify. I do have the option with my devices from another brand, Apple, on others where I can specify if I'd like somebody from the US or from different parts of. We can actually do different parts of most countries now. So I don't know the answer. I'm sure you can adjust that. So this is what I've been looking at, and I'm like, oh, I love that. That's really cool. That allows me to be able to go in and just start looking at some different sorts of areas. Now, you may be thinking, well, maybe I don't want to know that. Maybe I don't want to see that. That's the beauty of where we can go with these gems. Now, this is rinse and repeat. I can go back here, I can upload another file, I can tell it to go, and it will do all sorts of files, finding the information, and will always give me those three things that I've been looking for: the session analysis, the driver analysis, and the car analysis, if the information is there. If it's not, it will tell me I don't have enough information for a vehicle analysis, which is nice. But if you don't like it, great, let's change it. And so if there are things that you want and you want to be able to adjust, you just go in here and you either create a new one, or you just edit this language here and you adjust. So what I would typically do is I go back to my prompt, and I do this all the time in a different context, in a different capacity. But you go back to building a Google Gem, and you can go in here and say, this worked really well, but I want to be able to change this, this, and this, and it will be no problem at all. I will revise that for you. We will readjust what the prompt looks like. We will focus on that, and you can go back and change that. You just copy and paste it back into your gem and try again. And that's the beauty of this sort of AI type of work. Can you get to a comfortable sort of output as to what you're looking for? So that was the first thing which I wanted to show everyone today. And I'm enjoying the data. I'm enjoying the analysis. I'm enjoying it has images, but it also If you want it to, we'll build an infographic so you can view the information. It will build you a presentation if you want to be able to view it, and all sorts of stuff. And I'm thinking in those sort of capacities, if you are an engineer on behalf of somebody else and you're not racing, but you're helping someone, this could be a great way of being able to show the information. So that was the first thing I wanted to be able to look at. Now, I had mentioned that the second thing I wanted to look at was something called NotebookLM. Now, this is my second favorite tool that I've discovered recently. I did a lot of courses on things. There's one called Notion AI that does the same sort of thing. But I happened to notice that I didn't need to subscribe for that because it was part of a function that we got as part of a subscription to Google. And again, I'm not talking about the future of where things are going, but I'm finding that as independent sort of solutions exist, a lot of the companies, the OpenAIs, the Googles, the Microsofts are recreating those within their sort of consolidated platform. So again, I'm one of those that I don't want to have to keep paying for multiple sort of things because that adds up. And so NotebookLM popped up and I'm like, great. So if you go to notebooklm.google.com, again, if you've got a Gmail account, you can access this. You don't get all the features, but most of what I'm going to show you today, you should be able to get all of these. But remember, the difference with this tool is that this will only work on files that you give it to be able to analyze for you. And it does a very good job. And effectively, it's rather like saying, I've gone to a meeting or a series of meetings. Imagine you went to a conference. Imagine you went to PRI or something like that, and you saw tons of presentations and webinars and everything, and you had a massive notebook of information. You'd listened to stuff, you'd taken screenshots of slides and everything like this. We see this happen all the time. I mean, none of us have probably ever been in a place where we haven't photographed a fantastic slide we've seen at a webinar, or we haven't taken notes in a notebook, or we haven't audio videoed it. One of the things we were doing at work the other day in my other capacity was whiteboards. If you whiteboard something, you just upload your whiteboard. It'll read it, even with my dreadful handwriting, and it will start understanding it as to what's going on. So you got notebooks, create a new notebook. I created one called the AiM Race Studio3 manuals. And you open it up, and the first option it's going to give you is adding sources. Now, the first thing I added was the Race Studio3 manual. And I just uploaded it, and it gives you everything. It gives you a quick description, but every single piece of information that's in that manual is in here. And as you can see, there's a lot of it. And so that's the first thing I put in there. The next thing I put in was information, or I found a really good article on somebody had written an article about the MXL Pro, but also a lot about math channels. I was like, love that. Right, grab that, like it. That's really good. Other things that I put in here. And then I was like, okay, well, I've done many of these webinars with Roger. And so as you can see, if I go and add a source, I could add a Google Drive, I could add a website, I could add a YouTube. So I grabbed all the YouTubes that I'd done, or some of them with Roger, and I grabbed those YouTubes and I stuck them in there as well. And so you can add all of this sort of stuff. And it's just like pages in a notebook, which is fantastic. And so then if I close those down, you get the opportunity of being able to quiz or interrogate this data. Lovely, right? So you're going in here and you're like, oh, fantastic. How about something like, can you help me with the math channel formula for oversteer? So it's going to go through all that information, and if it's available in there, it's going to go in and go, yeah, all right, I can have a look at that.
And the interesting thing about this is it's gathering data only from the sources that you provided. So now it's not
Exactly
going out
right.
and finding fake stuff and trying to make up stuff. It's only coming from here.
Right. So this is either coming from a channel. So you go in, you're like, great. Analysis oversteer, onboard sensors, basic formula, and then you can start trying these. Some of them may work, some of them won't. Some of the formulas are named different things, but it starts giving you an idea in terms of how the system, and it will reference back where it got this from. So it'll say I got this from different sources of data. Some will come from documents, some will come from manuals, and so you can go in and have a look at all of this. You're like, great, I love that. That's really cool. But this is where it gets even fancier. And so with the few more minutes I've got until we can start answering some questions and everything, if you upload all of this information, and notice I've uploaded a lot of the webinars I've done. I didn't want to do it with everyone else's. I did it with mine because obviously I'm a narcissist. But at the same time, not really. I just didn't feel doing stuff with other people's data was right. And so these are the ones that I've done here, mostly about driving analysis and everything that is here. Great. So it'll give you a summary. But this is what I love. On the left-hand side, you've got this option of being able to synthesize this data. Now, the reason that NotebookLM became popular, I'm not going to do it, but if you click on this one, it will make a podcast, an actual podcast, which looks like real people. They don't look like me, but at the same time, they will have a podcast talking about your content. They'll do it in an audio fashion or a video fashion about your content. I wasn't so interested in that one, but I wanted to be able to understand some of the other things that are on here. So this was my favorite of all the things I uploaded. There were two which really stood out. So I asked for flashcards, I asked for a mind map, and we can go through all of these in detail, but we won't. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at two. The first is we're going to have a look at an infographic. So I clicked on infographic, and this is what it produced. Now remember, this is looking at my former sessions. And so a driver's guide to, I didn't do any of this. This is basically learning from the videos that I did with Roger, listening to the transcript because it can only transpose video and audio into text, which is what it's done. And so this is a 3-step framework for lap analysis. 1, start with time distance. No disagreeing with that. Sounds like something I'd say. Analyze the speed trace. That's always the first place I look in terms of what's going on after that. And then investigate the driver inputs. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fantastic. And then beyond a single lap, find consistency. Don't just analyze your fastest lap, your performance across different sectors. You're like, okay, that makes sense. This was one that I do all the time. I'm like, wow. I'm like, oh yeah, that's something I said. So obviously it's clearly gospel. But at the same time, if you notice how one of the things you may see in my webinars, I'm like, highlight all your laps, take the fastest lap and make it red, make every other lap gray, then the red pops and you can see what the line looked like in terms of where the accurate lap was. And so it's picked it out. And then find where the data is noisy, which is trademarked to Roger Caddell. One of the first things I ever learned from Roger Caddell was look for noisy data traces, which I love. And so it's found that. So it just did this. And I'm like, wow, that's very cool. I could probably post this or download it or put it anywhere. So then it said, all right, well, no problem at all. If we're going to sort of make sense of that data, let's see what a slide deck looks like. So I'm going to click on here and it's going to be like, okay, here's your journey from plateau to podium. I'm like, blimey, that sounds fancy. And naturally, knowing that I'm English, it put Silverstone on there, which was lovely. And so if I go through this, it starts, every driver reaches a plateau. The data can be overwhelming. We talk about that all the time. I have no idea where they got this visual from, but it's nothing that I would have seen before and nothing that we would have done because we rarely ever use those colors. I'm like, okay, fair enough. That's interesting. Simple cut through medal of the what, where, and how, and this is what I loved. I'm like, I didn't build any of this. This is all from the notebook that we created. So what happened? Clearly identified loss, where did it happen? It happened at this point, correlation in terms of drop of speed. And then how did it happen? This shows that sort of overbroke for a particular corner or something's going on there. I'm like, okay, cool, nice. Adding sensors provides a deeper insight. This is the GPS view. This is the view. And again, remember, I used a PowerPoint in the YouTube video that I did, but remember that YouTube video is just text. It's just taken all the text we look at. So it's recreated the images. So I won't go through all of this, but it's a super tool in terms of being able to look at ways of being able to analyze data. So for me, this has become one of the most useful tools for the simple reason that if I've got massive amounts of files, which we've got, and reference sources, and I am quite honestly tempted, even though there's 210 of them, so it would take forever, the fountain of knowledge that comes from these AiM webinars, to put them all in here and then have the ability to start querying them in terms of, how would I analyze my data? What can I do if I've only got GPS? What do people think about the steering wheel situation and, the SW4 or whatever need be? All of this is going to be available for you just to query and prompt. And if you ever wanted to be able to make it simpler, you can work through this. And so this was the second thing I was going to show everyone today, because I have to say that it's starting to make my life a lot easier, especially if I'm starting to query things in terms of how do I set up different types of solutions. So with that, and with the request to hand the time back to Roger with a few minutes to go, maybe to answer some questions, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it back over. But hopefully these two tools have been a useful way of being able to look at the AiM data differently and start to think about how you could use this to speed up that sort of track analysis, because ultimately that's what I'd use this for. If I were at the track and time were of the essence, I would probably hotspot in, I download the RS2 files, throw it in here, have it analyze the data, and then have it on my mobile phone, and then walk around, find peace and quiet, which we all love to find at the racetrack, and maybe just listen to what it's saying or look at it. And so that's ultimately what I wanted to share everyone today.
Perfect, James. I appreciate it. I don't know if you have the questions box open on your
I'm just about to have a
screen.
look here. Yeah.
Go start that process, and I'll kind of start with the middle one that Bruce has asked there. Say, do not include laps 1 and 2 in the last for evaluation. I believe that very clearly. James actually even kind of mentioned that. Let's get rid of the in and the out lap, and maybe a couple of yellow
100%.
flag laps or something. No doubt about that. But what about the first question that Bruce has there, and the one that Alan has later? Have you had a chance to glance at them?
Based on the data, can it infer things like tire warming temps, or does it need to be informed somehow? It can understand the temp of the tire as soon as it's being logged by the system. And so what would be interesting is if you did choose to leave the out lap and the in lap in the file, you can see the gradual increase. And one of the, do you know one of the things I always think about as a racer? And again, the strangest things go through my head when I'm, especially as I'm on the, the warm up lap, usually is, why am I doing this? I'm an absolute idiot because I'm nervous at that point. But at the same time, we all warm up the tires, but have we actually warmed them up enough? And if I enter into that corner as fast as I can go on lap, after the green flag, are my tires up to temperature? And so being able to see that increase, we can see it in Race Studio 3 analysis as well, but just being able to have a prompt that says, hey, I'm always looking at this. This is what's in my crazy head. Can you give me an answer to this? Is it consistent? Do I need 3 laps to get up to speed? And temperature. And one of the things that was really interesting is when I analyzed my own data for an event I recently did called the Walter Hayes, in a qualifying session of 10 laps, it was basically saying, we recommend starting on this pressure because you need to be in this window by this point of time. Now, one of the things that Matt always taught me, and I've learned so much from everyone, I'm a bit like a magpie, in stealing other people's ideas, but at the same time, he was sort of like, okay, well, this gives you a sort of like a warm up for the tire and maybe work backwards to the exact temp. It's still a bit of trial and error to say these are the temps I want to start at. So to have a system look at it and say, look, it will warm up to here. So yeah, it will know as soon as the laps and the tires and moving from there. So if it doesn't have the data though, I doubt it will infer it. But if you've got pressures and temps, it will. And I don't know if there's a formula it can take from pressures and time of day and temperature of the track and stuff like that. But for me, I probably wouldn't ask. I'd probably just use the temperature sensor because most of the time, even the cheap ones that you get tire and you get temp and pressures at the same time.
Well, to kind of build on that, the AI doesn't know other than what it's finding either on the internet or in the information that it's giving you. So don't look at it. It kind of ties in with a chat that Kyle just made a second ago. It's not. Yes, it's just parroting things that it's finding, but you can feed in additional information, and then the power of the AI, the way I look at it, is its ability to scan through thousands and thousands of data points or laps or whatever it happens to be and find things. So on your tire temperature thing, tire temperature, when was the optimum tire temperature? Begin to put in your gem or your instructions to start looking into when does maximum lateral G's happen with what tire pressures and tire temps, right? And then pretty soon it can learn what optimum was, and then then you're kind of off and running, giving it more information for it to dig through everything with. So yeah, it's not a push a button and you get the perfect answer out of it, but it really does allow the research to dig in and go through so much more data so much more rapidly than you and I can.
Totally agree. And I love that. I remember, as you said, Roger, it's a tool. We went back and we had a goal. So if your goal is to be able to make sure the prompt is working towards that goal in the context of everything else that's going on. So I love that. Alan's asking, does it do well calculating proper optimal lap time, blending sectors? Yeah, because the beauty of it is that the data we get from the RS2A download is so granular in terms of its delivery. It's by, I think the RS2 download is by distance and time. That, yeah, it's not working on sectors, it's working on micro, basically, elements of data, which are hugely useful. So I found that the optimal app is actually pretty good in that sort of basis. So again, we can go back. And one of the things that I'm tempted to do over time is, as we start looking at downloads, can I download segments and all sorts of stuff? But there is an element of as if it takes longer to get AI to do the work, then just use Race Studio Analysis to do it for you. I think that there's a blend between the two, which is don't force something. One of the things that we find constantly happening as I start to evangelize AI in other capacity as well is that you oftentimes people get AI. I did a course the other day, it's fascinating. AI anxiety, which is we hear so much about it that everyone is like, oh my God, where am I going to use AI? Where does AI help me? I must learn how to use AI. It's definitely what's going to be there. But interestingly, PricewaterhouseCoopers' latest global workforce trends that came out on the 12th of November suggested AI is only used by every day by 14% of people, and that's only up 2 percentage points from a year ago. And so even though we hear about it absolutely everywhere, but what that's doing is that you've got on one hand everyone saying let's focus on AI, and you've got the other hand going, where is it going to work? And so I think this is the beauty of these sort of scenarios, and I found it myself, which is does it actually make sense? Or if I'm going to do segment analysis and sector analysis and go into the details and everything, right now, it's faster for me to probably do that in Race Studio 3 analysis. If I'm at the track and I just want to run a prompt, give me the highlights so I can, as somebody quite confidently says here, which is funny, finding peace and quiet at a track with Porsche's on track. Yeah, agree. Probably unlikely. But you know that moment when you just want to get out of the way of everyone and just get the moment yourself. Maybe that's useful.
Yeah, I agree. The way that I'm thinking that I'm using it after playing with AI, and of course tons of background in Race Studio and Race Studio 3. My first step is still going to be Race Studio 3, where I'm still going to jump in there and theoretical best laps, and and all the different things, the tools that we're already using, vehicle health things and checking oil pressures, writing some math channels to do it instantaneously right where I download the data. But after the weekend is where I think I will probably use it, or in the evening, where I will then take the 4 or 5 sessions together and do a little bit deeper analysis, where I use the power of it being able to look just through just mounds and mounds of data and bringing it together in ways that I've asked it to do. So that's how I expect to use it. But so I still expect to do a lot of work inside of Race Studio 3, at least
Yeah,
for now.
agreed. There's one here that Carl's written I just want to answer because I think that it's absolutely on point, which is AI essentially enhancing the insight or just parroting it? I think there's an in-betweener phase there, which is if you think about a very talented race engineer or somebody who looks at data a lot, AI is probably going to do a okay job. May not be able to look at everything. It's going to take ages for it to be able to figure it out. If you look at the fact that I've been successful as sort of an okay person who can read data is because I figured it out and everyone kept coming to the trailer and saying, hey, can you read my data? Can you read my data? And I just want to enjoy my weekend. And so I think that having AI parrot what would be done by somebody in a fast fashion for, the lowest common denominator who's got a solo, who's got sort of information to be able to work on it, I think that's got to have value to it as well. But in between, I think that there are some interesting things. I personally love the driver input side of things. I still get very overwhelmed with the race engineering part of the car components, shocks, getting the optimal tire pressures, understanding balance, ride height, and then you throw in aero and all sorts of other stuff in terms of that basis. So if it can help me by parroting something it's learned from somewhere else, so I can learn from it in a way that I can digest, I like that too. But it's I think it's an absolutely spot on question that we need to be able to trial and error this stuff until we find its true value.
And where it works for you as an individual. The
Yeah.
everybody's going to have a different level, and we're sitting here talking in November of 2025, right? And who knows what it's changed in the 3 or 4 months since you did part one. You've found new ways of doing it. It is the companies have tweaked their tools, right? So it's what's going to happen in the next few months, let alone the next couple of years. And there's always an option that Race Studio 3 may have a component built right into it to do some of
Mhm.
this for us, directly from Race Studio 3 at
Yeah.
some point in the near future. So those are all things that the landscape changes. So we'll see where we go. So I appreciate it. Let me
Cool.
bring up and start to share my screen again, and kind of get ready to land this plane, as they say, right? The some interesting information. The only thing I would ask James, maybe we can quickly go over this just so before everybody has to jump out. You've talked about sharing some files and things. Those were not things that were sent to me ahead of time. You're going to send some stuff to me. Give me, if you have an idea, either way, I'm going to put it into the YouTube description. The links will all be in the YouTube description for those of you here live. If you didn't get any of that stuff, whatever James sends me, I'm going to place into links to those files in the YouTube description. So
Great. What I'll do is I will, and if somebody's watching this a year from now, 2 years from now, it may not be working as we originally because it's a file, but basically I can make the gem that I created for anyone to view it, and you can click on it and you can download a file and put it into that gem. And so I'll leave that alone for at least a year, so that the link will work in the YouTube video. I can't guarantee if we get to 2027 that link is still working, but for the time being, we'll leave that open for people to trial and error. And if it's not, you can always ping Roger or something, and he'll ask, and I'll recreate or send it over. And it'll just be that gem I created that you can just upload your information and copy it into your version of Gemini.
and I think you were going to share maybe the location of some of the other files that you use. So do share whatever you can, and I will include links into the description here in a few hours. It'll be up there if you're watching it on YouTube. It's already down there, and go ahead and download everything and go play. So appreciate it. The a lot of what we're doing here obviously goes out to all of these YouTube videos that maybe we'll be pulling into, like James has done soon, into some of the tools. But this one will be up there in just a couple of hours, and join the rest of them. If you haven't visited there's the link. Just go to YouTube and type in AiM data, and you'll find our website. And make sure you subscribe and click on all the right things there. And there's all of our videos, all of our webinars, plus tons of other videos are up there as well. So go ahead and take a visit there. It's part of our customer support system. We're out at racetracks all the time. We're even throughout the winter, throughout this time of year. We're in the southern part of the states, or on some indoor events out there going Baja 1000 this last weekend. We had staff down there, so there's customer support happening all the time, and of course, call the 800-718-9090 AiM tech line, which will get you support from our folks at any time. So give us a call. Let us make sure we help you get the most out of what you have. Next webinar will be driver performance. It'll be the third one of kind of a series. We had vehicle performance, we had vehicle health, and now we're going to be doing driver performance. And that one is coming up on December 9th, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. I'll be presenting that one and talking about 4 or 5, 6 or 7, who knows how many different ways of analyzing data to understand how a driver is performing, comparing against before, looking into ways of looking at it with just a single data file. It's a big part of what most people use data for. This is probably the one that people like to use the most. So we're going to jump in and show you a few things, some good basics, and always, of course, we'll throw in 2 or 3 advanced ways of looking at data for those of you that have been playing with data quite a bit. So join me on that one on December 9th, and we'll have a good time at that webinar as well. So a little contact information as we kind of close this one up. There's my email address, roger@aimsports.com. Contact me anytime, anywhere, right? And James can be reached at datatutorials@jamescolborn.com or at jamescolborn.com. James also has, we've put the links up into the live chat, his YouTube page, and for just a wonderful series of videos that James has put together outside of the AiM, these ones here that we're talking about here with these webinars. So those links will all be down in the description here on this YouTube video. So James, I appreciate you coming in and doing this. I know you're a busy guy, and you come in here and 14th one of these you've done. We certainly appreciate your time. Anything else you'd like to add as we kind of close this one up?
No, I just want to say thanks everyone for watching, and everyone watching on the YouTube. If you've got this far on the YouTube, well done. Yeah, I think what I love about these is that I get a chance to sort of show what I'm experimenting with, but it is nice to hear what other people are doing as well. So I think there's no wrong answer to this right now, and so I think that we are in quite a significant shift in terms of how AI is impacting what we do, and I don't think that data analysis is going to be any different. I think we're all going to figure out different ways of doing it. So hopefully in the future, we'll see different people with different points of view using AI, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes out.
Yeah, we kind of put you in a tougher spot. We give you these ones. We did sim racing for a while when it was fairly new, and you were the one of the lead folks for us on that. And now the AI side, and we're putting you in an area where things change so quickly that people could look back in a couple of years, like you say, and well, some of the stuff we've talked about may not be perfectly clear, but yeah, appreciate the effort. You've done a fantastic job on all the stuff you've talked about. So
Thank you, and
perfect.
thank you everyone for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks again, and thanks everybody for attending. We'll look forward to seeing everybody soon. We'll of course AiM will be a big part of the PRI show coming up here in the weeks ahead. So if you're visiting that show, make sure you come and drop by the AiM booth and chat around and see some of the new products that AiM is coming out with, which will be announced there. So that'll be fun. So everybody else, I appreciate it. Talk to you guys soon.